God damn it.
Yeah, we're gonna have fun with this one. Oh yeah. Backyard Wrestling 2. There goes the neighborhood for the Sony PlayStation. Right. This thing is also available on the original Microsoft Xbox, or as we used to call it, the Xbox One. Before there was an Xbox One. God, that's a stupid name. Although this game may or may not be compatible with Xbox 360 consoles, if they still have backwards compatible. I wouldn't bother testing that theory, but I digress. Apparently, this is a sequel of sorts to a prior video game of Backyard Wrestling that I've never played before. Go figure. Let's pop the cover for that game on screen for a bit, yeah? Don't try this at home, huh? I would most certainly hope not. So, for those of you who have never had the joy of experiencing backyard wrestling, I envy you tremendously, but the general concept is basically a bunch of kids wrestle in their backyards with a makeshift ring, makeshift weapons, makeshift blood and gore, a bunch of makeshift bullshit if you ask me. Backyard Wrestling 2 doesn't feature any generic kids in this game. You'll have to make those yourself in the game's woefully pathetic Create a Kid mode and its limited options that are quite frankly not worth any further mention in this video. But the game does feature actual hardcore wrestling talents such as ECW Originals New Jack and the Sandman. You also got the Insane Clown Posse, you also got Vampiro, you got El Drunko, you got CZW icon Zandig, Jesus! And a whole bunch of other guys that you may or may not be familiar with. There's only two modes in Backyard Wrestling 2. There's Career and there's Exhibition. Exhibition is where you wrestle a quick match, while Career is the game's story mode where you guide your created piece of ass cheese through various matches, make money, and unlock a bunch of crap that is worth fuck all. Yeah, you can pretty much tell that I don't think too highly of this game. And to be quite honest though, it's not the worst wrestling game I've ever played. I've seen worse, I've played worse. However, that's not saying much of anything at all. Anyway, the gameplay of Backyard Wrestling 2, it's a glorified button masher with some wrestling elements. You have a couple of attack buttons that you could mash and, do attacks with, quick combos, that sort of thing. You can grapple to execute grapple moves and submission maneuvers. You have a fair amount of wrestling moves, at least. You can attempt pinfalls or submission victories. But this information means nothing because the wrestling is secondary to the game's main draw, if you will. The ability to beat the shit out of each other with whatever weapons, tools, and other assorted hazards you could come across. Essentially, this is less of a wrestling game and more of a fighting game of sorts, and not a particularly inspiring one either. Even though you can win by pinning your opponent for the 3 count or forcing a tap-out victory during a submission move, like in a regular wrestling match of course, more often than not the idea is just to beat the crap out of your opponent until his life meter drains completely and gets knocked out. This becomes a chore in and of itself, as none of your attacks do any real significant amount of damage. In fact, most of the match will have you building your turbo meter to perform your wrestler's super move, which is the only really damaging move in your arsenal. As such, matches tend to drag for very long, and after a while they become boring, especially when it's the same shit all over again. The various wrestlers may have different move sets, it's a bit of a stretch there, but that's not really saying much when half those folks are able to do the same fucking Boston Crab leglock move in exactly the same way. Controls work well enough, I suppose, but trying to position your garbage wrestler to face your opponent is a dauntingly complex task. And it's not like there's any multi-man tag team contests to be found here. Every match in Backyard Wrestling 2 is always going to be one-on-one, so there's no reason why you can't have a button that locks to your opponent or have your fucking waste of life constantly face your opponent. It ends up being less of a match and more of a game of catch-up. Not to mention that everyone has a tendency to run and not just... I'll give it this match. It does give me that extreme hardcore vibe that was lacking in the PS1 ECW offerings from Acclaim many moons ago. The various arenas and its surroundings are every bit as much of a weapon as the various international objects you'll come across in Backyard Wrestling 2. So it does feel like extreme hardcore action. I just wish the gameplay was worth a damn because it really isn't. None of the wrestlers feel that much different aside from minute changes to their moves list, and without any variety in any of the match types, you get to a point where playing the same kind of match over and over again starts to feel a bit boring and uninteresting. It's just bland as horseshit. Graphically speaking, I'm not quite impressed with the graphics here, to be honest with you. Backyard Wrestling 2's backyard garbage wrestler models look okay in a sort of substandard Dreamcast quality sort of way, if that makes any sense. The various locales and arenas you get to fight in are not that great looking, but I guess I could compliment the environments and how they're nicely interactive. Slamming your foe through some barrels or debris in the brewery, powerbomb him off a high point, pick up some debris and use it as a weapon. It's a nice idea, I suppose, but the whole game just looks kinda second rate. Every so often there's a bit of model clipping, background extras will appear and disappear out of nowhere as if they were just figments of your imagination. Apparently the game uses Acclaim's old Let's Bleed Anywhere and Everywhere blood engine, complete with smear marks that are supposed to represent open wounds. Oh good god, this is terrible. Just terrible. By now you've probably noticed that the majority of the music heard in this video is taken from other games and other sources, as opposed to being in-game music from the actual game itself. That's because Backyard Wrestling 2's soundtrack is comprised entirely of licensed tunes from the Insane Clown Posse and other grungy bands of that ilk. It's an acquired taste, and fans of that particular brand of music might enjoy it, but it's not my cup of tea. As for the rest of the game's sounds, you have your usual sound effects of punches, kicks, and stuff. They sound, whatever, they're there. There's some voiceover clips from the actual competitors, some sound-alikes here and there, but really doesn't matter. All of it sounds mediocre, lacking in enthusiasm, much like I am at the moment reviewing this game. And that didn't turn out that well. Anyways, yeah.
Just go home now.
Not guilty!
Ultimately, if this is everything Backyard Wrestling 2 has to offer, I'd hate to see the original game, which is supposedly much worse. What is it with these designers anyway? Yeah, ultra-violent backyard garbage wrestling as a concept is pretty fucking stupid in itself, but you could have made a top-notch quality game out of the damn idea if you put a little thought into it, but I guess that was too much effort for these guys. Overall, Backyard Wrestling 2, There Goes the Neighborhood, it's an interesting premise with shit execution, not really worth the effort in tracking down. PlayStation 2 owners already have a bunch of solid wrestling titles in the form of the SmackDown vs. Raw offerings. Pick any one, they'll all do. And even the original Xbox meager and unimpressive lineup of wrestling titles are far more polished than this thing is. For a cheapo curiosity piece, it might merit a few laughs, about 3 minutes worth. But for a genuine wrestling game of the extreme persuasion, not even a good game, just a genuine one, it misses the mark worse than Sabu missing a spot. There Goes the Neighborhood? Yeah, there goes the shithole more like. Bottom line, and I rarely say this straight up, this game sucks. The end.
I'm going to win it all.
Nice.